As I was learning, I needed to be able to invest positive emotion in what I was learning. I needed to be able to see myself being successful. If in fact, as I was moving, as I was surfing across the various computers to pick up the ideas on Vegemite, if I'd felt I was being unsuccessful, I would have stopped. There are other things that I've got to do. And then after I'd pulled out the pattern, and then I wanted to check the pattern or the main ideas about Vegemite against other sources, then I needed to think of storing them in memory. Now, if I'm going to actually use my knowledge of Vegemite to change my behaviour, to change what I do, I actually have to automatize it. I actually have to be able to use it relatively automatically. In order for me to map any knowledge into behaviours, you think of any of us learning to drive, or any of us teaching our children, you know, on the hill, you know, to do the handbrake start in the manual. You know, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting how people learn actions, or children learning how to do backhand in tennis or a golf swing. How you actually automatize it. When you're doing the action, you actually know a lot of things, but you don't realise them at that point because all your thinking space is going to where, you know, to where you're standing and so on. So for me to automatize, for me to make a skill is something that's done automatically. For me to make a skill out of it, I've got to have the knowledge automatic in my mind first. And then I, you know, in terms of the Vegemite, I started to think, well, what if someone did, are there other things that you could make? Is the salt in the Vegemite, is it really, does it come out of the beer? Because from what I remembered about chemistry, that I don't think necessarily you get salt out. So someone, I think, is actually adding the salt in. And so could you have a form of Vegemite made from concentrated yeast from beer that didn't have salt? And so I started to think, you know, and I thought, could I find another product that was similar to Vegemite but didn't have the salt? The reason for that little rave was to illustrate what a model of learning looks like. What are the key actions we do if we are autonomous learners? And so what I'm suggesting is that as leaders, you need to know what learning looks like. And I'm wanting to push learning from an explicit knowledge enhancement perspective. So I'm wanting to say that in every class I teach, children have learnt when they know more, can do more, believe more, or whatever. When there's been some change. I have earned my money if the children leave my class explicitly showing their knowledge has changed. I have earned my money when I'm working with colleagues, when I've convinced colleagues to either believe something different, know something different, or do something different. That's what I'm on about with knowledge change. And I'm really wanting to push an explicit theory of learning. So, in other words, if anyone says to us, what does learning look like? What does learning look like? I'm able to say it involves this, this, and this. Go on the web and put in theories of learning. How many will you find? A few. More than a few. You'll find constructivism, behaviourism, social learning theory, developmental theories, vicarious learning. You'll find the Lovay-situated cognition. Look, you can go on forever. You'll find all the learning. What do they all involve? What are the things they all involve? What are the actions that learners need to do? I'm suggesting there are 3 key types of actions that all learners need to do. Number 1, the learning starts with what you know. When Pavlov conditioned the dogs to dribble, when they saw steak, what did those dogs know? They knew that if they saw a big piece of steak dripping a bit of red, they could lick their lips. And they could also all hear the bell. If he had tried to condition deaf dogs, it wouldn't have worked. If the dogs hadn't been able to perceive the bell, if their existing knowledge hadn't been able to capture the bell, they wouldn't. What if they linked the bell with extreme fear? What if someone had actually given them electric shocks before the bell? Would they have learned to link the bell with the steak? Probably not. So your existing knowledge, even in the case where Pavlov had the dogs spitting when they heard a bell, the dogs still used their existing knowledge. If I'm wanting my colleagues to learn something new, identifying and valuing their existing knowledge is critical, just as it is in every class. And in literacy, what are we calling that? Getting knowledge ready. Okay. The second key aspect, we have the learners change their knowledge. And when you're changing your knowledge, effectively what you're doing is getting the person to see new links between ideas they've already got. And those new links become a new idea. Is that okay? So that what we do is, all we're doing is getting new links made here from there that becomes new knowledge. And the third thing, the third aspect of learning is making sure it's stored in memory. Because if it's not stored in memory, when the children go out to playtime, they're not going to be talking about how earthworms breathe. They're going to be saying, I'd like a chocolate ice cream, or who's going to bat first. And so the ideas that existed in their thinking space 2 or 3 minutes earlier won't be there now. And so in any lesson, in any learning context, what might we expect to see teachers scaffolding if they're having kids learn? Getting knowledge ready, explicitly scaffolding the new learning to link the new ideas, and then storing it in memory. And it's not the teacher storing it in memory, because hopefully it's already stored in the teacher's memory. No, I'm saying that seriously. It's the students storing it in memory. It's the kids saying where the new ideas fit in, what they are, what they remind them of, what questions they answer, how they'll use them in the future, all those sort of things. Okay, so if I'm taking a group of children on a journey, what would my learning look like? I want the students to be challenged. I want them to be, I'm wanting them to learn the ideas. I'm wanting them to talk about what the outcomes will look like once they've learned. I'm wanting to stimulate various parts of their existing knowledge. I'm wanting them to believe that they can learn the ideas, that they can really be successful. In the same way, you will be wanting the teachers with whom you're working to believe that they can learn the new practice, that it can work for them, that it will make their lives easier. It's critical. You want the teachers with whom you work to know how to learn, so that we get the knowledge from the, remember we talked about the teachers having the conceptual knowledge and mapping it into their action knowledge. For them to put it into actions, they need to know how to learn. They need to know how to get it there. And we need to make sure in our discussions with our colleagues that we value, we've said this before, we value their experiences. We help them bring them out and really use them. And we also value what they know in abstract ways. Then we set about having the learning. And I've argued that we learn in specific, partial, context ways first. And I would go out on a limb and I'd say, for any idea that I'm wanting students to learn,